Hello and welcome to Educating Marshmallow, Part 3, or at least this is the third part of the discussion of Hamlet. And I want to talk in this part about theatricality as a form of affectation that is very important in the play and that definitely preoccupies Hamlet. When the troupe of actors come to town, he asks them to perform a little bit of one of his favorite plays just right off the bat. And he describes what he liked about the style in which the play was written. He said, I remember one said, presumably Hamlet himself, there were no salads in the lines to make the matter savory, nor no matter in the phrase that might indict the author of affection. Important passage, title of the book, indict the author of affection, but called it an honest method as wholesome as sweet and very much more handsome than fine. So he's saying basically that this play is written in a style that does not have any salads in the matter to make the matter savory, which I take to mean dirty jokes, nor no matter in the phrase that might indict the author of affection. People have argued about what that means. There goes Marshy. Some people think, again, it's the fact that this play that Hamlet likes doesn't have any love scenes in it. But it's a little bit of a puzzling question. Because usually it's not the matter of a play that is guilty of affectation, but rather the style in which it's written. And Hamlet's concerns are definitely partly stylistically. He talks about it having an honest method, handsome and wholesome, as opposed to sweet and fine. So I think what he is doing is saying this play is written in a style that's different from the euphuistic style, which was popular in early modern England for a while. Its chief exponent, I suppose, was John Lilly, who wrote a book whose title character is Euphues, and the book is written in a very flowing, lyrical, repetitive style that's full of little tricks like the "'tis true, 'tis pity," and "pity 'tis true" that Polonius uses, sort of switching around the order of words, parallel phrases here and there, and lots of little tricks of repeated sounds and so forth. Hamlet doesn't like that sort of style, and he's saying this play is written in an unaffected style. However, the lines that he quotes from it, from memory, have caused a lot of critics to say that Hamlet's judgment is questionable. And the lines have, they don't have the fault of being too mushy or sweet or whatever, but they're just over the top, gory, and they're excessive, hyperbolic, and I'll read you a couple. Roasted in wrath and fire, and thus o'ersized with coagulate gore, with eyes like carbuncles, the hellish Pyrrhus old grandsire Priam seeks. So the play is about the fall of Troy, and the murder of Priam is the scene that Hamlet wants the players to play. So what's the point? Well, the point is that Hamlet is concerned to avoid affectation, but then the play that he's quoting has its own stylistic faults, which again is an illustration of Michel de Montaigne's idea that in striving to avoid affectation in one regard, we tend to fall into it in another respect. And Hamlet's concerned with authorial affectation here because he's going to himself write some lines to put into the play that he wants the players to perform in front of the king and the queen. And then, so he gets the players to perform, but then the players' performance of this tragic scene where Hecuba is lamenting the death of Priam he gets very upset about this because the actor is able to show more emotion than Hamlet himself is when he's confronted with his own, father's death. As Hamlet says, "Is it not monstrous that this player here, but in a fiction, a dream of passion, could force his soul so to his conceit that from her working all the visage wand," and so forth. The player has kind of broken down in tears during this recitation, whereas Hamlet, as he says, "I am like John of dreams, unpregnant of my cause, and can say nothing." So he feels envious of the actor's power to perform an emotion that is not really authentic to the actor. In a way, the author's affectation is more powerful than Hamlet's own affection, as Hamlet himself realizes. However, Hamlet goes on, after saying "I can say nothing," to give a long speech where he really kind of works himself into a towering passion of his own. He starts, saying, "Bloody body, villain, remorseless, treacherous, lecherous, kindless villain." But then he stops and says, "Oh, this is most brave, that I, the son of a dear father, murdered, must like a whore unpack my heart with words, and fall a-cursing like a very drab, a scullion." So he says, "Gee, I can't seem to say anything." Then he says a bunch of stuff that he doesn't like. It's over the top. And he compares himself to a woman, a prostitute, who just curses and abuses language in that way. So we see that Hamlet is starting to feminize affectation, that the expression of strong emotion through language is itself kind of associated with women. And as we'll see when he confronts Ophelia, femininity itself, in Hamlet's mind, is an affectation. It's an inauthentic pose that conceals a very sinful interior that, according to the misogynistic texts of the time, Hamlet, pretty much all women possess. So that's the source of Hamlet's rant against Ophelia after his to be or not to be speech. He says, "I have heard of your paintings well enough. God hath given you one face, and you make yourselves another. You jig, you amble, and you lisp. You nickname God's creatures, and make your wantonness your ignorance." So Hamlet is kind of rehearsing a very conventional idea that women are, prone to paint themselves, their faces, with cosmetics, which was a sign, in those days, of course, as a sort of falseness, a false mask that they put on. They jig, they like to dance, they amble, they walk in a perhaps suggestive way, and they lisp. And for some reason, lisping was taken to be an affectation, and maybe still is by some today. You nickname God's creatures, maybe Ophelia has a pet that she likes to give a funny nickname, and make your wantonness your ignorance. That's the major accusation here, that Hamlet is saying that women, like Ophelia, are wanton. In other words, they are, sexually indiscreet, unfaithful, sinful, basically. They're Eve in the Garden of Eden. But they make their wantonness their ignorance. In other words, but they pretend otherwise. They pretend not to know about the sexuality that they themselves are, full of. So Hamlet is really, this is Hamlet's most unsympathetic moment in the play. But what he's doing is he's projecting his own anxieties, right, Maharishi, about his inauthenticity. When he's worked himself into that passion after hearing the player's speech, he's projecting his own sense of inauthenticity and affectation onto Ophelia and making her guilty of it too. And there's just enough truth in that accusation that Ophelia seems to take it to heart, and that's what prompts her to imitate Hamlet's insanity, but in Ophelia's case, of course, it takes the extreme form of drowning herself. But we should not ignore the misogynistic conventionality of this rant that Hamlet indulges in, which, as he says, I've read about it. It's in all the books that Shakespeare's audience would have been familiar with. Women were deemed to be, according to the very sexist notions of the time, irrational by nature. Only men could have any reason in them. And reason came from God. So anyway, so that was a reason for men to, continue to have their patriarchal and misogynistic ideas. But Hamlet knows that he himself has these same passions, the same affectations. He's capable of them, just the way Ophelia is. But he wants to project them onto her, as he does with his mother, too. Now, the final passage I want to talk about is his address to the players when he is giving them advice as to how to perform their own craft, how to act. He is trying to tell them basically to avoid theatrical affectation. If you mouth it, he says, and mouthing means pronouncing with exaggerated distinctness or declamatory effect. As many of our players do, I had as lief a town crier spoke my lines. So don't, act like, a town crier, overdoing your lines. Do not saw the air too much with your hand thus. Don't be theatrical, don't be exaggerated. And he's trying to set down these rules for a more naturalistic theatrical performance. And he gives us an idea of what theatrical performances of the day were like in this speech. He talks about having a fellow whipped for doing termagant, it out Herod's Herod. Well, back in those days, these were characters who were always going to be played in an exaggerated fashion. Termagant was basically someone who could only, say nasty, snarky things. And Herod was always portrayed in the vice plays of the time as a ranting tyrant who never stopped shouting, basically. So Hamlet is trying to, move the theater out of that sort of very stereotyped, over theatrical mode into a more naturalistic mode anyway. He says, suit the action to the word to the action, with this special observance that you o'erstep not the modesty of nature. So he also used the word temperance earlier. So the virtues that he wants to set up against theatrical affectation are temperance and modesty. But that all depends on our using what he calls our discretion to regulate our behavior. Now, what's ironic, of course, is that the only place where Hamlet can even conceive of behavior that is, natural and not overdone is in the context of a theatrical performance, because everywhere around him in real life, as he sees it anyway, there's nothing but falsehood and deceit, lies, hypocrisy. In other words, affectation.